Hello my friends, welcome back to my channel. Hello everybody, welcome. If you are new, welcome to my channel. My name's Crystal. I make bookish videos. I talk mostly about romance and fantasy. Romantasy, historical romance are my faves. And today I have a video for you that is talking about all of my 5-star historical romances that I have read this year up to this point. So I will say that I haven't read quite as many books as I have in the past this year, and I also have been reading more of a variety of genres, so I don't feel like I have as many historical romances to pull 5 stars from, but the ones that I read were fantastic. Some of these were 6-star romances for me. I adored them. So let's go ahead and get into it. So the first book that I want to mention is Adjacent But Only Just by Nichole Van. So this author is one that I didn't discover her myself, I found her from friends. Like, you know, mostly that's how I find books. But I started reading her last December, and I instantly fell in love with her writing style. I really, really, truly love how this author creates her characters. They feel so real. They feel so like you could just reach out and touch them and hug them. They feel like very relatable. They all have things that they're struggling with that I feel like are a very universal experience while also feeling like personal to you. And that goes for the hero and the heroine. So I think something this author does really well is she creates just as much inner turmoil or inner conflict or any type of journey for the hero as she does for the heroine. And I think that's something that really makes her books work really well for me because it doesn't feel just one-sided and like the hero is just sort of there as a foil. I really like seeing the hero's journey and seeing his struggles and seeing his point of view. So I think she's a beautiful author. I really love her prose. I love her romances that are built and developed very slowly and really give you time to get to know the characters and to see them fall in love every single part. I love that so much. So this book is my favorite I've read from her so far. I haven't finished this series, but I do plan to. I have one book left. And this is book 2 in the series, so I do feel like you need to read this series in order, specifically for this book, because there are some things that happen in book 1 that have to do with the hero in this book. But the basic premise of this book is we have our heroine she's a gentlewoman and she is a very famous authoress, and she is sort of buzzing in the social circles at the time that she's going to meet Ethan of Penleith, who you meet in the first book. He's one of the Penleith brothers, and she's going to meet him. He is a revered poet. Everybody loves his work and loves him and thinks that he is just brilliant, including our heroine. So she's going to meet him because it's sort of understood that they're going to have a marriage of convenience. They're going to maybe not of convenience, they're going to wed. Everyone thinks it's going to be a perfect match for the two of them to be together. So, as she's traveling there, she ends up actually meeting his brother, Malcolm. Now, Malcolm is a very somber guy, and he has had a lot of heartbreak come his way, and he is dealing with the ramifications of that. He is deep in his grief and kind of struggling to get his way out of that when he meets our heroine, and so he's not really in a place to love and lose his heart again. But from the get-go, when these two characters meet, you can feel they have this connection that goes beyond just a physical type of chemistry. You can feel that they have some sparks, but it's more like souls speaking to each other, and it is just so absolutely beautiful watching that first initial moment. I mean, honestly, one of the main reasons why I love a romance, and specifically historical romance, is how that first meeting is established. How do we get to see and feel that these two have a connection that hopefully transcends more than just attraction, you know? So there is an attraction, but that is not at all the thing that compels them towards one another in the beginning. And they have this relationship that develops over time, but they have to kind of keep it secret because of his brother. So there's an element of forbiddenness in there, but never at any point does it feel like over the top or just there for dramatics. This feels like a very natural, beautiful love story, and it was so romantic. I adored this book. I love this whole series, but this one is my favorite that I've read so far. So now the next book that I want to talk about is My Season of Scandal by Julianne Long. So if you've watched any of my videos, you know how much I love Julianne Long. She is just a diamond of the first water when it comes to historical romances, and I feel like she is severely underhyped. I don't feel like enough people are reading her books. I think she is so fantastic, and if you like historical romance, I am begging you to read Julianne Long if you haven't already. I know a lot of you have from my suggestion, and I'm so happy about that. So this is her most recent book in her series that she's working on right now, The Palace Palace of Rogues. This series is basically about two women who came across really hard times. The man in their life had died, and they find out they have some things in common, and so they take what used to be basically a bawdy house and they turn it into this grand palace, which is a boarding house on the Thames. And the whole series takes each book. There are different guests who come to stay there and they end up falling in love, and it's just beautiful. It has great found family in there. So this book really, really struck me in the heart. We have our hero, who is known as a rogue, Lord Kirk. He sits on the House of Lords and he is deeply involved in politics, and he is a little bit older than our heroine. Our heroine hasn't had a successful season. She hasn't made a match. Her father is dying, and he is worried that she's going to be left alone. So he sends her to London to have a season, to hopefully find a love match, to find someone who will take care of her so that he can leave this world in peace. And so there's a little bit of a bittersweet edge there, because you know that's why she's going to find a husband, and it also adds a bit of urgency to that. Urgency so that he can rest in peace knowing she's taken care of. She doesn't have a lot of success in her first season. She doesn't have the most fashionable dresses. She is kind of teased by some of the girls, and she's having a hard time fitting in. And it really highlights, I feel like, what it would be like at this time to be in society, to be out, and how much of your success, your future, your happiness really depends on what people who really aren't of great significance, but also they are, if they choose to let you in their circle or not, you know. So Lord Kirk sees this happening to her. He's also, these two are guests at the Grand Palace on the Thames. And his heart kind of goes out for her. One, because he is attracted to her, and two, they have had an interaction at their boarding house, which has made him feel like intrigued and interested in her. And so he kind of sees this happening to her, and he starts to try and help. And some of that help is by dancing with her, and some of that help is by trying to lead her in the right circles. So they have a lot of covert meetings between the two of them without a chaperone. And that's where you get to see their relationship build and develop. And it's so, so beautiful watching them have these quiet moments where they're talking with one another, they're having really great experiences getting to know each other, and they're also falling in love and having some great chemistry develop. So it was absolutely beautiful. Okay, so now this next two are actually books that I reread this year that I haven't read in many years, but I'm going to recommend them anyway. So this one was actually a 6-star read, and it's Wicked and the Wallflower by Sarah MacLean. Now, I am a diehard Sarah MacLean fan. I think she's such a gifted writer. She has such a good grasp for telling a story and for hitting the beats that romance readers really want in her books. And she also creates relationships that are full of passion and romance and longing and yearning, and I just love that so much. So Wicked and the Wallflower follows our heroine Felicity, who is, she just has been basically kind of rejected. She had a marriage proposal to a duke. Her family has recently come upon some pretty dire financial situations, very common in historical romance, you know, and so she needs to find somebody to save her family, so she has to get married for that reason. She sets her sights on the duke, hoping, because she knows, like, that way her family will be secure, but in her heart, what she wants most of all is passion, longing, love. She wants someone to burn for her. She wants someone to want her desperately. She wants that so bad. That is the number one thing she wants. So our hero Devil has a bad history with the duke that she's going after, and he sees her one night on a balcony, and he realizes that he has an opportunity to use her to get back at the duke. And so he offers her a proposal that he will help her land the duke, and she agrees and says, okay, but you have to make him want me. He has to burn for me, desire me. And so then they enter into this little game, and of course they catch feelings along the way. And one of the most satisfying things about this book, and the main reason that I love it so much, is we get full access into Devil's thoughts about her all throughout the way. And we get to see his point of view and her point of view. This is third person omniscient, basically, so you get both of their points of views. And it's so beautiful because there are so many moments when he's looking at her, he's admiring something about her, and not just physically, he's admiring who she is, and he has these thoughts about how much he would want to be with her, but he doesn't ever feel worthy of her. And that's something that I really, really love, as a hero who feels like he's just never quite good enough for the heroine. And even though there is this plot that he intends to use her, you know, for his own means, he definitely never, ever, when it comes right down to it, when he acknowledges his feelings for her, her thoughts, her consent, her wishes, what's going to make her happiest, is what motivates him the most. And I have so much love for a romance like that. I think alpha heroes are all good and fine, but a man who will sacrifice his own wants and needs for the good of the heroine, like, that's romance to me. This is one of the most romantic books I've ever read. It is so incredibly swoony. There are so many moments with like near kisses and just a kiss, and I feel like we don't get that enough. I feel like we don't get enough really romantic swoony kissing scenes. Everybody's so ready to get further, but I love nothing more than just a beautiful romantic first kiss or things that are showing us how people feel about each other. Like, I just love that so much. So this was a reread for me. I don't know if I mentioned that. I read this first in 2020. I've read it multiple times, and I reread this book, and I loved it even more, so. Okay, so now the next book that I want to talk about is another reread, and this is, again, The Magic by Lisa Kleypas. This was the first book that I read by Lisa Kleypas that had me completely convinced that this author is a magician. There's something so magical about her books. She writes romance unlike anybody I've ever read before. And sure, some of her books are not the best. Most of them are. This one, I think, is one of her best books she has ever written. It is so deeply romantic and full of emotion, both the good and the bad, both the emotions that sort of drive them to do things that are going to get them to be together, but they're also not always beautiful emotions. I just loved this book. So this is another one I read in 2020. I fell in love with it, but I haven't revisited it since then, so I got to reread this year for my book club on Fable. And I, once again, was just completely captivated by this. This follows McKenna, our hero, who is the servant of Lady Aline and her family. They are young when the book opens. They're in their teens, and they fall in love right away. They have a very, very powerful, very swift falling in love as young people. They are so connected to each other, so deeply connected, and their love is so real, but some things happen. Some people find out that they are together, and Aline's dad does everything he can to tear them apart, to the point where Aline self-sacrifices and falls on the sword, basically telling her dad that, hey, as long as you don't ruin McKenna, put him in a good situation so he can keep working, I will make sure that he never comes back again. And so she does that, and she basically tells him that it was never real, they were never really in love. How could she deign to be with a lowly servant? Which destroys McKenna, as you would imagine, you know? And I think that the interesting thing about this book is there's a point where you're like, McKenna, why did you believe her? You know, why would you believe her? And I think it's because she was saying all the things that McKenna was most afraid of. Like, he felt like he wasn't good enough for her. He felt like, why would she be with a servant like me? And thus begins the separation that sends them both into emotional distress. And some bad things happen, some good things happen for some of them. And they're brought back together later on as adults. Aline still hasn't married. McKenna went to America and made a fortune for himself, and he has come back. And he comes back with the intention of destroying her, basically. He wants revenge for the heartbreak, the complete devastation that she wrought upon him. But he cannot stop feeling for her. He cannot stop or deny the love that he felt for her, that it was real. And so the whole time they're back together, even though he's angry and even though he's broody, he wants so badly to get her to confess that she actually did love him. So this book was so beautiful and so powerful and also so angsty, which I really love. I don't feel like this type of angst is found very often in romances, the kind where it's, at least in historical romances, the kind where you just know that they want to be together, they are meant to be together, but there's something internal that is keeping them apart. So I loved and adored this book. This is a classic, and it is completely beautiful. I ate this book up. The last 25% of this book had me in tears and had my heart pounding. I loved it so much. Okay, so now this next one is one that I actually did not rate 5 stars, but upon reflection, I really feel like this deserves to be a 5-star romance, and I think it deserves to be in this video. It is The Autumn Bride by Gracie. So this is such a beautiful and cozy and fun book. This follows our heroine, who has a sister, and they're in a bad situation. They're orphaned, and there is the plot where her sister is going to maybe end up in prostitution. So the heroine goes out of her way to save her, and in so doing, she saves 2 other girls. So they kind of end up bonded together in that way. 2 of them are sisters, and the other 2 just come into the picture. And our heroine is sort of trying to figure out, how is she going to support these girls? How is she going to keep them from a life of prostitution? How are they going to survive? And she sees this manor house in the distance, and she sees a light on, but she notices that the light is never on in the living quarters. It's only in the servant quarters. And so she has this idea. She's going to go over there and try and see what she can find that they could maybe sell and survive in that way. So when she goes over there, they end up getting caught by someone who actually is living there. And it's a very elderly woman who is basically bedridden, and the servants who live there have not been taking care of her at all. So it is so charming and so cute because our heroine goes in there with a means of necessity of survival to find whatever she can to protect her family and get them to survive. And she leaves there determined to help this old woman in there who has not been treated well. And then they kind of end up in this found family type of circumstance, and everything looks like it's going well. The girls move in with this elderly woman, they get rid of the servants who weren't taking care of her, and this elderly woman says, oh, these are my nieces. So imagine the surprise when the actual nephew of Lady Beatrice, who is the elderly woman who lives there, he shows up, and he's like, I know you don't have any nieces, so who are these people? And he believes that they're out for nefarious ways to ruin her, to take her money, to steal from her, and he's continuously trying to prove that that is right. Meanwhile, our heroine, Abigail, is just trying to survive and trying to take care of Lady Beatrice and her sisters, and it's really, really cute to see the two of them fall in love because it seems very unlikely that they will. So this, again, is definitely not the most romantic book on this list at all, but it is a very cute love story, the way they fall in love together, and overwhelmingly the thing that I love about this most is the found family and Lady Beatrice, and just the way these characters just live and how they go through life with trying to survive when they need to, but at the same time rising up and doing good for others. And I love that, and I feel like that's something that isn't seen very often. So this one was definitely worthy of 5 stars. It's probably like a 4.5 realistically, only because the romance isn't the strongest, but this is still one of the funnest books that I've read this year. Okay, so now this next one, the next few are recent reads, and they are all fantastic. 2 of them are 6-star reads, including this one. So this is The Marquee Who Musn by Courtney Milan. Courtney Milan, she is such a beautifully gifted writer, and she has a way of writing that really resonates with me because she takes her time as she's building up her romance. She takes her time to put in very subtle but also very clear scenes of these two, in this book specifically, of these two getting to know each other and falling in love with each other, that highlight so much about their character and that show so much about, this is actually why I like this person and this is why I could fall in love with him. I think too often we get romances where it's like, oh, they're super hot, I want to be with them, I want to do them, and it just seems so boring. So it's so refreshing to me to find a book like this where the setup isn't your average everyday setup, the characters are certainly not your average everyday characters, and it's just full of these little pockets of scenes that are very quiet, but they say so much about the building romance and the connection that these characters have or are going to have in the future. So the premise of this book is our heroine lives in this town, I believe it's called Wedgeford, and that has a bunch of Asian immigrants who live there. So our heroine is Naomi, and she is living with her parents. She is not entirely satisfied with her life, and she is not happy with how she feels like her parents are settled and not in love. So she dreams to be an ambulatory or something like a paramedic, and she wants to take these classes, and her parents do not want her to. So she ends up going to the classes anyway. She's ready to sign up, but on the way there she was supposed to pick up a man who was traveling from Asia to meet her family. She sees what she believes is this man. He is a tall Asian young man, and she assumes that's him, and she drags him with her to go sign up for these ambulatory classes. And this poor man just kind of goes along with it, you know? And there are reasons why he does, but it's not apparently clear from the get-go when you're reading it. And as she's signing up for these classes, the people say, hey, you can't sign up by yourself. You have to either have your parents or your husband sign up for you, the man who's in charge of you, basically. And so she turns to this young man who has, you know, she's been following her, and she's like, oh yeah, he's my fiance, he'll sign for me. And he goes along with it. He does. Come to find out, he has a very traumatic past in that town where his father basically was a swindler and took everybody in the town for all of their money. He just took all their money and ran, basically. So the son comes back to town to try and make amends for that, and he's met with a lot of prejudice from the people who knew his father. So we have Naomi, and then we have Kai here together, and they're put in this situation where other people don't see the best in them. They see them, and they are quick to make judgments based on what they see on the outside or based on what they assume. And Naomi and Kai never, ever, ever do that. They see what is really there on the inside, and to them it is something beautiful. They see their true motives, and they understand where the other person is coming from and what they're doing, and to them it is nothing but beautiful and worthy of love and admiration. But it's not like an overnight type of thing. This is a love story that takes a lot of time to get to their happily ever after, but I just find that type of reading experience to be so fulfilling because we get to see every single step of the way, all of the falling in love, all of the swooning moments, all of the recognizing things about one another that speaks to somebody's soul. It's perfection. I loved it so much. That was 6 stars. Okay, the next one is My Darling Duke. So My Darling Duke is a classic historical romance, and this one was another reread for me. So when I started this Fable book club a few months ago, I think it's been like 4 months that I started it, one of the reasons I wanted to get into it was to have a reason to reread some of these classic historical romances that I really loved and to introduce them to other people as well, and it's been so fun. So this is another one I read in 2020 and I loved it. I haven't revisited it since then, and I kind of felt like maybe I wouldn't like it quite as much. I was kind of worried about that, but I was also curious to see what I could remember from this one. I ended up loving it just as much, probably even more so, and appreciating even more the way that Stacy builds her characters and how she builds her romances. So this one, basically we have Kitty, who is wanting her sister to get married. She wants her, her sister needs to get married. Kitty doesn't worry about herself. She's worried about her sister getting married, making a good match, being happy. Kitty has resigned herself to the fact that she likely won't get married and have that type of happiness in her life. And so she makes this decision to just go ahead and say that this Duke, who everybody knows he's a recluse, he is scarred, he is injured, he doesn't come out, nobody really wants to talk to him anymore, so she goes along and says that she's actually his fiancé. It goes out in the papers, it gets spread around, and that provides enough like social clout to get her sister out in society and to hopefully get her to make a good match. Meanwhile, the Duke sees this and he hears this, and instead of being like upset or annoyed or angry, he's intrigued. He's intrigued with why would she do this? Why would she say she's my fiancé? And so they end up meeting, and that begins this very beautiful, sometimes slow, sometimes fast, show of how these two are falling in love. Now this book has a pretty big focus on the physical intimacy of the characters, but I would say it equally has a focus on the vulnerabilities that they're sharing with one another, and again, how even though they're in this situation that is very contrived and it is very obviously like not the best situation to have a happily ever after, there are moments when each of them sees the good in the other person, and that's the ruling factor of why they want to be together. And it's so beautiful. It is so romantic. I loved it so much. Okay, so now the last book, the last 5-star read, is another 6-star read, and this is by a favorite author of mine, and this is The Finest Print by Erin Langston. So this book, at the making of this video, this book isn't even out yet. It releases September 24th. I got to read an arc of this, and I was enamored from the beginning to the last page. Erin Langston is an author who writes exactly what I'm looking for in a romance. She excels at creating what I've talked about a lot, what marks a 5-star romance for me. She excels at creating these very small details that say so much about how that person is feeling. There's one line in here when the heroine, says, oh, the hero, he's with me, when she goes somewhere that maybe he shouldn't be, and she just runs a finger along his sleeve and he can feel it. And the way that she describes how he feels that and what it means to him is so small but so powerful and so beautiful, and that is just one example of many of those throughout this whole book. Again, this has the same themes that I'm always looking for in a 5-star romance, where you're putting the other person's needs and desires and wants ahead of your own. True great romances to me can never have a selfish character. It can never be all about what you want. It has to be what is going to make your partner happy, even if that excludes you from their life. Like, that I think is the ultimate test. And I think that's a lot of things that people who read romance, they don't want. They want them to be together at all costs. But to me, I feel like when you love someone and you want what's best for them, you want whatever is going to make them happy. It doesn't matter if it doesn't make you happy. It has to be what is going to make them happy. So this book is fantastic. It is a totally different setup than I think what we're used to in historical romance, and it again is a very slowly evolving, building romance full of those quiet, beautiful, lovely things, lovely scenes that just say so much about feelings that they're having, feelings that they're starting to acknowledge for each other, not verbally, internally. So our heroine is the daughter of Chief Justice Sinclair. He is the brother of the heroine from the first book. And she has just come out of an engagement. She decided she was going to back out, and that has kind of ruined her socially. Nobody else wants to marry her. She's a bit of a pariah. She's not invited to social events, and she willingly took that upon herself because she did not want to marry this man who she kind of had bad feelings about. Her parents thought it would be a good match, but she knew there was something about him that was not going to be good for her, that was maybe not going to be good for anybody, and so he's a little bit bitter about that. Our hero, Ethan, comes from America. His uncle has just left him this printing press, this printing shop. He worked in newspapers in America, and so he comes here to inherit it, and he thinks he's going to start a life for himself. He did not realize when he came here that that printing press was already in debt, so he doesn't actually own the building. He has to pay off this debt first before he can even claim it, or he will lose everything. So he tries to think of a plan quickly to use the printing press to make some money so he can pay off the debt and live here, make a business for himself, and he's kind of coming up empty. That's when he meets our heroine, who is an aspiring novelist, and she's having a really hard time getting her book published, and that's all she wants to do. So he comes up with the idea when he finds out that she writes sort of grisly, gory mysteries. Hey, what if you write a penny dreadful, and we try and sell that because they're kind of able to sell for like a penny a week, and that is how they think they can make some money. So they work in this team effort to have that happen. So that's the basic plot. They're in forced proximity because of their working circumstances. And honestly, this book was just so lovely and so beautiful. I love all of the characters in here. Erin writes characters that are so fully fleshed out. You see and feel all of their desires and all of their fears, and I feel like the real test of having an author who has characters that are true to the characters they've created is if they make decisions that you feel like that character would make. Even if it's a decision you don't want them to make because you feel like it's going to just make you sad, it still feels true to what that character is going to do. The way that this couple loved each other was so beautiful to me because they had equal parts passion and desire that were also so beautifully tempered with some really great tender moments and beautiful loving gestures, and I just adored this book so much. So 6 stars for me, and yeah, there you have it. So those are all of the 5 and 6 star and 1 4.5 star historical romances that I've read this year. I recommend every single one of these. I recommend every single one of these authors, and I think they're fantastic and that you should definitely read them. If you have made it this far into this video, please let me know what a favorite 5-star historical romance of yours was. And if you want to leave me an emoji and let me know that you were here, please feel free to leave me a pink heart, and I'll see y'all in my next video.